What's going on, guys? This is Uche and Joku, Sneaker Principle Podcast. And today we're going to be talking about fear. We're going to be unveiling fear and how it impedes principles from achieving school excellence. Let's do this.
When they see me, they know that every day when I'm breathing, it's for us to go farther. You know, every time I speak, I want the truth to come out. You know what I'm saying? Every time I speak, I want to shiver. You know, I don't want them to be like, they know what I'm going to say because it's polite. They know what I'm going to say. And even if I get in trouble, you know what I'm saying? Ain't that what we're supposed to do? I'm not saying I'm going to rule the world or I'm going to change the world, but I guarantee that I will spark the brain that will change the world. And that's our job, is to spark somebody else watching us. We might not be the ones, but let's not be selfish, and because we're not going to change the world, let's not talk about how we should change it. I don't know how to change it, but I know if I keep talking about how dirty it is out here, somebody's going to clean it up.
And now he's been promoted. His job, principal.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, good day, good afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you are. Again, this is Uche and Joku, Sneaker Principle, and this is a Sneaker Principle podcast. And today we're going to talk about something that I talk to a lot of people about, but what I do is these conversations are happening in corners and, dark alleyways, because there's this word that it's not supposed to be part of the language of school leadership, but it's very important. So we'll get into it. But before I start, I'm going to extend myself again. If you are in need of coaching and you're like, listen, hey, Uche, I want to talk to you about something real quick, whatever the case may be, go ahead and drop me a message. You can go to my website, TSP Media Pub. That's tspmediapub.com. Leave me a message there, or just leave me a message or DM me wherever you're watching this. And let's talk. Let's come up with something. One of the things that I know that's really helped me and still helps me to this day is coaching. I have several coaches. I just picked up another one. Tom, if you're watching, who was actually a senior principal when I first became a principal, and then he left my district as I was starting my career as a principal. And now, all these years back, here he is now, as one of my coaches. It's very important. Coaching is very, very important. Mentorship is very, very important. If you ever played sports of any kind, or you've been in any high-level space, whether it's academic, whether it's professionally, there's always somebody there who's showing you the ropes. Somebody there, even after you know the ropes, somebody there who's guiding you. Somebody you can lean on and say, hey, I'm stuck, or I'm thinking about this big thing here, or whatever it may be. So I just wanted to extend myself in that capacity. But now let's get back to this word, this thing that we don't want to talk about, or if we do talk about it, we talk about it with shame. And that thing is called fear. I remember when I was a kid, at church, I was told, and I'm pretty sure if you've ever been gone to church, or you're, especially in that Pentecostal space, the whole notion of fear is false evidence appearing real. And yes, that's an awesome acronym, false evidence appearing real. But however, fear is real. Fear is real. No matter how you want to break it down psychologically, sociologically, or what kind of meaning or acronym you want to put to it, fear is a real thing. And fear is a real thing, especially for school leaders. Because let's look at the typical trajectory of a principal or an assistant principal. At one point in time, you were a teacher. You were in a classroom. You might have been, starting off kind of shaky, but eventually you get to a point where you're realizing you have skill sets that puts you in a position to really support other teachers. And then all of a sudden, maybe your principal or your administration says, hey, we want to give you more leadership responsibilities, which you take on and you do your thing, right? Then you start to tell yourself, you know what, maybe I think I can do this myself. Maybe, just maybe, I could also be, I'm sorry, I'm trying to adjust my mic. I could also be a school leader one day, maybe assistant principal, maybe the principal. So you go through all that, right? And the whole entire time you're watching the leadership of your leaders from the outside in, because you're not privy to behind closed doors on all the decisions and all the things that have to happen, all the conversations with, the hierarchy of the system. And I'm talking about potentially the superintendents and central office. You're not there for the reviews and and sometimes the tongue lashing that your leader might have to take. You're not understanding why there's so many pivots. One day you're doing one particular curriculum, the next day that switches to something else, and you're like, "What's going on, man?" The principal administration, they just they don't communicate. They're all over the place. But you don't realize that often it's because they are literally in a position where they're negotiating directives. Some directives that are non-negotiable, some directives that are kind of like implied as being non-negotiable. And in that space, you have to remember that person, that principal, that school leader, whoever they may be, maybe even superintendent, are people who are put into a position in which their role is not necessarily secured, in the sense of that, unlike a teacher who might be teacher unions probably tend to have pretty strong agreements on how teachers are evaluated and moved out of a position. And those rules, they're still pretty good for administrators, but they're also kind of like, much easier to use to remove a principal or school leadership. So what ends up happening, you have people who come into the position and then they realize, oh my God, there's so much more than what the textbook said, what my professor at my leadership program said. There's so much more, so many more nuances, right? And all of a sudden you're like, man, I don't want to mess this up. Because unlike a teacher, where there might be tens and dozens, in some cases hundreds of positions still open. Like right now in New York City, thousands of positions still open. There's an opportunity for you to find another space. But as a leader, it's not the same. You don't have tens and thousands, tens and hundreds of positions. So you could just say, okay, listen, it didn't work out here as an assistant principal, I'm going to go over here. Or it didn't work here as a principal, I got to go over here. No, there's so much more monitoring. There's so much more eyeballs. So, and you're so much more exposed. So you find yourself questioning whether or not, if this doesn't work out, I can go somewhere else. And for a lot of people, it literally means going backwards. And I've seen principals who've gone from being a principal to being back to being a teacher in a classroom within the same district. So yesterday you were running a school. Today you're teaching third grade. I've seen principals who, and that's, I've seen the leadership back to the classroom as a teacher. I've seen principals back down to being assistant principals. I've seen, some people, once they're removed, they just walk away. They can't handle the shame or the burden of the questions of what happened. Or in a lot of cases, what happened was very public. So I say all this to say that fear becomes that kryptonite for a lot of leaders because they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to be put in a position of being removed or being shamed. So what does that mean? What does that mean for leading in spaces, leading schools, supporting students, parents, the community? It means that you have a lot of leaders who don't go 100. Like I'm talking about going. I'm not talking about wilding out and just being like, listen, I'm just going to do whatever I want to. I'm saying they don't go 100 in the sense that you don't ever see their full potential, their full, battery of ability and intellectual weapons and educational, expertise and the experiences, all the things that in all reality is why they were put in that position. You see them taking baby steps, being cautious. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. And there's nothing wrong with being cautious. But when fear cripples you as a school leader, that's a whole nother thing. So let's first talk about identifying the roots of fear. I want to share with you a story of me being in that position as a new school leader and being very, very careful. But first of all, okay. Let me take one step back to when I became an assistant principal. So first, unfortunately, I was very lucky to have had a mentor principal, who I'm still really good friends with to this day. His name is John, and John, I tell him every time, like, you put me in a position where you forced me to think outside of the box. You threw so much on my plate as your dean, then as your assistant principal, that I didn't know that typical leadership wasn't what he did for me. And what I mean by that is, as a dean, he became a turnaround executive. He became an executive principal, and he was given a school that literally they pretty much said, "Listen, you have but a year or so to make some significant changes, or the school is shutting down." And this offer was made to him. He was already in a very successful school. And then he asked me and another gentleman to join him to go to the school. And I said, yes. This is a man who gave me an opportunity to really stretch myself. So I said, yes. We went to the school, and we were there together for about 2 years. 2 years? Yeah, 2 years. Two, maybe 3 years. I'm getting old. And in that space, I came in as a dean. My job is culture, right? But then he said, you have a special education license, so you're also going to be my special education coordinator. I was like, okay. He says, and you also taught science, living environment and physics. You're also going to lead the science team. Yes, sir. And then, he said, you know what? Take the math team as well. Mind you, I was, at this point in time, when all this transpired, I was in my 4th year as an educator, and I was now the dean of a school that was on a chopping block without eyeballs on it. Then I was also, for that same school, the special education coordinator. I was the math lead and the science lead, and it was a very young team of teachers, and it was mixed with some teachers who already had gone through the ringer. They were at school, they were struggling for a couple of years, and here I am in that position. And yes, I was kind of like, okay, how am I going to do this? I wasn't scared, but I was a little bit overwhelmed. How am I going to do this? And my principal said to me, I trust you. Listen, I'm going to give you every tool you need. I need you to know what's happening there so you can tell me what's happening so we could be on the same page, because I can't be everywhere. So I was like, okay, that's my mandate. I'm going to lead these teams. I'm going to make sure that we're meeting all our compliance, that we were assessing and we knew where all the kids were and we were doing what we need to do. And that's how I functioned. That's how I rolled. I rolled like that. And the way he led me is how I led my teams. And that school is still standing to this day. It's been well over a decade. That school is arguably one of the better high schools, 6 through 12 schools in the Bronx. And it's also an international baccalaureate school now. And I know that the seeds were planted when, my principal said, hey, I need you to lead, and I'm going to give you the space to lead and be innovative and really, do what you think needs to happen. Just make sure you're painting within the lines. And sometimes I colored outside the lines, but there were never any surprises. I told him exactly what I was doing, and he gave me full support, and I rocked out. And that year, there was an article posted. I think it was like the Daily News that we were the most improved school in New York City based on parents' satisfaction surveys, and that was incredible. And then to go to boot, our scores were pretty dope as well. So like again, the school was never closed down, and it's still there. But now, when I became a principal, the first school that years later that I became principal of was a school that had its issues, and I had a superintendent who was pretty much like, okay, here's your school, here's the map that I've created for you. And it was a good map. These are the things that I want you to do at this school to turn the school around. I looked at it and I was like, okay, this is cool, but it didn't speak to the way I was trained. You know, looking at the details of what was happening, studying the space. This is what John taught me. You know, who are the players, the teachers, the students, the parents, the community? What was the community saying about the school? You know, all these little things. We approach leadership from a very assessment-driven mentality. You know, you go into the hospital, we're going to assess you, we're going to evaluate you, we're going to see remember the TV show House? The way the team would walk in there with the patient and be like, start throwing ideas. What do you think this is? Oh, it might be this, it might be that, it might be this. Until you came down to 2 or 3 things. And then by process of elimination, you came down to the probability of it being this one thing. And sometimes it wasn't. But that's the level of thinking we're doing in that space. My first year as a principal, I was given a task that was like, here. It was like, here, you're going to bake a cake. Here's the recipe. Don't deviate from this recipe. And I had a problem with that. But I was a new principal, and I won't lie to you, I was a little shook. I was a little nervous. I was a little bit like, you know, I don't know what I don't know, so I'm going to follow the instructions given to me. And what that did also was it made me very nervous because, again, I didn't want to screw up the recipe. I did not want to screw up the task that I was being given. So that's how I moved. Everything that I did was because the superintendent said so. And even though in my core I knew this is not going to work, like what I'm looking on paper and I'm like, this is not what the school needs, because at the same time as I'm trying to apply this recipe, I'm studying, I'm assessing, I'm evaluating. And I'll be honest with you, it crippled me. It really did cripple me. And so at some point in time, I had to kind of like, you know, make a decision. You know, am I willing to sit here and drive a bus that I know that's going to break down pretty soon, or do I stop the bus, you know, pull out the right tools, fix it, do what I need, do what I know that needs to happen, then move the bus forward. So that's what I did. I sat down with my AEP, you know, my core team, had a conversation. I don't think they even realized what my thinking was. The thing is, I just needed to get them on the same page with me. I knew what the mission was. The mission was to bake a cake. You know, the recipe, you know, there's the outcome. But sometimes you might have to make some adjustments to that recipe, and that's what I had to do. I had to mimic some of the things, how I built my team out, who I put in what position. I had some strong people, and my thing was the blueprint was given to me when I was led. So all I did was take that same blueprint and tweaked it just a little bit to fit my style, and identified the strong people on my team. And like, listen, I need you to take over special education. This is what you're going to do here. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. We're going to meet on a weekly basis, in some cases bi-weekly, for you to share with me what's going on. You know, and then we can make the right adjustments and all that. And the outcome, you know, was great at the end of the year. You know, but I did take a tongue lashing. That superintendent met with me and was happy about the results, but did question me about why I didn't follow her instructions. And I argued the data. And that's the thing too. You know, I was fearing that conversation, but also I realized, because this is also what I learned from my training in turning schools around. The data. You know, you can do all the cosmetic things. You can put in all the curriculum and programs that sounds great on paper, but if there's numbers to support the implementation and to support the value of that thing, then what are we talking about here? And yes, she was mad at me, but at the end of the day, you couldn't deny the scores. And it was great because I didn't allow fear to stop me from doing what I need to do. And even though, listen, it was nerve-wracking, but I was like, nah, if I let this be the way I move forward, then I'm not going to survive. You know, so I just want to say this, like in sharing the story, you know, as a leader, you may face fear. You face, no, you will face fear. Fear is going to be in your face. I'm trying to find a way, or you're going to feel fear, however you want to put that. But and the fear is going to be based on the possibility of failing, judgments, and what happens if you make an unpopular decision. But however, if you know what you're doing is the best direction for your community, sometimes you just gotta do it. You know, and sometimes you might not know if it's the best, but have the data to support the decision you're about to make. You know, have the data to say, listen, there's a high probability that this is going to work, or this is the way we need to go. Yes, nothing is guaranteed. Of course, nothing is guaranteed. I made some decisions where it did not go right at all. But however, how would I know if I didn't try it? And I've always mitigated my decisions. Again, like I said, with data. Like, okay, what's the probability of this working? You know, where have I seen this work before? You know, in these other spaces, were they similar to my situation, to my school? You know, I talked to other leaders. I've called leaders from other states where I was reading an article or saw something. I was like, this person's a principal just like me, and they're in Ohio. Let me hit them up real quick and ask them some questions. And people will pick up. People will pick up because they're leaders just like you, and they've gone through a lot of similar things just like you. So there's a ripple effect of fear in leadership that needs to be addressed. This ripple effect is, I'm going to make this very, very clear. When you're leading, all eyeballs are on you. Everybody's watching you. Everybody's listening to you. They're literally hanging on the tip of your words, like whatever you say. And the thing is that you don't have to be you don't have to be a phenomenal leader. You don't have to be, and you may be just brand new trying to figure things out. But when you're leading, people are literally following your directives. And it also goes beyond your words. The way you carry yourself, your level of confidence, what you believe, what you espouse, like they're literally hanging on every word, emotion, how you carry yourself, you know. So if you are afraid, or you're exhibiting fear, or you're kind of all over the place, it permeates itself throughout the whole entire community. It really does. When I've visited many schools, I've known many school leaders. The leaders who are just like locked in on top of their game. When you walk through these schools, you can see it. The school becomes a direct reflection of them. No question about it. Then when you walk to a school where there's a lot of nervous energy, and you know the principal's all over the place, or the APs are just all over the place, and they're barely hanging on. That's what you see. A school that's barely hanging on. You know, it's very important to understand that fear-driven decisions do cascade down. It ends up affecting staff morale, student achievement, and school culture. And it's something that you have to make sure that you're aware of. You know, it's sad. I've seen schools that were phenomenal, and the change of leadership was because somebody retired. You know, unfortunately, it might have been a tragedy. Maybe the leader might have passed away. But the systems in that school were amazing. They were long-standing. Then you bring a leader in who's new to the space, and all of a sudden they're now coming in with their fears and their self-doubts, and slowly but surely things start to unravel because they're not making decisive decisions, or they're allowing fear to make them change things that were working. But because they're trying to impress their own leadership, and maybe that new leadership might say, or maybe their leadership, the superintendent office might say, hey, there's this new program that is working in Delaware, and we want to bring it over here. And all of a sudden you're like, I have something here that's been here for a long time. It's been working amazingly well. But you know what though? I'm not going to argue it. That's my boss. Then they take out the thing that's working, put in the new thing, and the bus crashes, and you're wondering like, what happened? Like what happened? And then they start thinking to themselves, well, maybe it was me. I wasn't able to implement it well. I didn't implement it with fidelity. No, it should have been changed. And you knew this. You should have said something. You should have fought harder. But you didn't fight because you're like, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to be that person. And that's what ends up happening. That ripple effect. Your fears, your anxiety, your issues starts to impact everybody else. So this is something that you have to really be aware of. And I'll tell you this. Many leaders find themselves in this position because they don't speak up. If they do speak up, they don't speak loud enough. I'm not saying go yell at your boss. No, I'm just saying speak loud enough. Make sure you're being heard. Make sure what you're saying is being documented, so that it's very clear. This is where what I thought, and I would love to negotiate with you as my leader on best steps to go move forward. And if it's said like, nope, we're going to go this way, then let it be documented that, I opposed, but I'm part of the team, and I respectfully said, okay, I will implement with fidelity. But you guys speak up. And I'll tell you this, every time I've ever spoken up, the outcomes were almost always positive in favor of what I was speaking up for. I can only think about one school leader that I ever had that was my leader who shut down everything I said. And it was okay because she was the principal. I was the assistant principal. And yes, assistant principal, sometimes you have to speak up because your principal might not be seeing the full picture. And if you're the assistant, that means you guys should have a much closer relationship because you're working together. I've always told my assistant principals, it's the way I run. It's not me here and you here. No, it's me here at the center and you next to me. And if I have multiple assistant principals, then we are all standing. I'm the one in the center because when people focus in and lock in, they see me, but you're shoulder to shoulder with me because you're an extension of me. That's what I believe. Now, I'm trying to think about if I should share another scenario. Where fear played a role in my decision-making process and ensuing results. And I want to give you a negative one, not a negative one, where I didn't go with my gut. I don't know. There's probably one. It's just that I've just been very lucky to be, not lucky, fortunate. Good fortune has been on my side that I just speak up. I speak up. The only thing I think about maybe is when I was outside of education. When I was in corporate sales, I used to work for Kinko's. So I was an account manager for them, and I can think about times where they were like, "Hey, this is your sales pitch, and this is what we need you to say, and everything else." And I've never been good with sales pitches, but I did that for over a year, where I went by the script. It said you got to follow the script, and my sales was just like, mediocre at best, because I'd be like, hello, this is Uche Njoku. I'm calling from Kinko's Incorporated. I am a territory sales representative, and I'd like to find out from you if you have any upcoming projects, whatever we can support you. I was more like, listen, I don't want to be on the phone. So my process was, which again, I was told didn't work, because if I was hitting the phone, I made 100, 200 calls a day, the chances of me getting business was much higher than me pounding the streets and maybe in a day only hitting 4 or 5 or 6 businesses. But however, this was my system. I would look at sales records, like who bought what, when, where, how much they buy. And because I wanted to create my own spreadsheet of companies that I should target based on the month. And then also based on their purchasing history. But I wasn't going to just call you. I also looked through and see who are the gatekeepers. secretaries and who did I speak to. We took meticulous notes. The good salespeople did, and I did. So I would try to find out who was spoken to, who was the person who handled that particular order, as far as calling us for the order or managing the work that we're doing for them. And I went through all that. I had all that stuff. And if I didn't know, maybe that was the phone call. Hey, this is Chain Joker call from Kinko's. I was territory sales rep. Last year we did a couple of jobs for you. It was amazing. I just want to update my records. Is so-and-so still at the company? Because I just want to make sure that, if I'm not around and they call for the same job again, that, my team knows to be expecting. And this is the kind of stuff I would do. Who's the secretary? Who do you talk to? And then I pound the pavement. So I was up in Rochester, New York, years ago, and I was working for Kinko doing sales, and I got 2 jobs, back-to-back months. Because my sales goals were always like, hey, if you could hit $50,000 for the month in small to medium business orders, that was amazing. If you win over 100,000, that was like oh my God, that was just like, oh my God, right? So what I was doing was I had a little, petty cash situation so I can buy like coffee and whatever for our clients. So I would go buy flowers or buy a little gift basket, depending on who I was going to go see. Or it might be a gift card for some coffee, whatever. And I would go to the office and say, hey, I'm here to see Lynn. And Lynn would be like the secretary at Bosch Alarm or something like that. And they would say, who? I'm like, I'm called blah, blah, blah. I just want to stop by and drop this off for her. As a thank you for the order from last year, bro. So I'd walk in there and they would not be expecting it. And I would do mid-morning. By that time, you're getting hungry, you want to get to lunch, or you've been annoyed by your team. And that gift card, those flowers, that gift basket that maybe cost me like $5 from Wegmans, or $10 from Wegmans, they'll be so happy. And I wasn't there to get a job. I was there to just bring some sunshine to their lives and get them talking. And I found myself now closing consistently $60,000, $70,000, $100,000, $150,000 jobs, without having to call 100 companies. I would have 2 or 3 companies that do that for me, based on, maybe a total of 20 visits to different companies, versus sitting in the office and making phone calls. Because my thing was always, how many other people are sitting in the office making phone calls to these same companies? Because I'm sorry, you have all had those calls that come to your house or to your cell phone or wherever, and they're like, hey, I'm calling from, what do? You hang up, click, because I don't want to take a sales call. But what I did was I wasn't going to do sales calls. I was going to stop by and just say, hey, I'm just here to bring a little sunshine to your day. And thank you again for what you did, for the order from last month or from last year. I was just in the neighborhood. I just want to make sure that if there's anything coming up that you remember, I'm here for you. Here's my business card again. That stuff worked. But yeah, I'll tell you this though. It was working, but before it worked, those numbers started coming in. I took a lot of stuff. The regional sales manager was like, what is going on here? We're looking at your sales force and you have barely any calls in there. What's going on? And blah, 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 blah. And I was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm sorry, I will jump on those calls. Sometimes I had to lie to them and be like, I'll jump on those calls. But I wasn't going to jump on those calls. But I had something I was doing that jumping on those calls was going to take away from me. I'll tell you this, when they got that first $100,000 plus sales hit from my branch, from the work that I did, everybody left me alone. They left me alone. And it was funny because my peers were like, how are you doing this? How many calls are you making? And I'm like, I'm making maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 calls a day. And it was follow-up calls to the people I was visiting. And then I'll hit the road. And sometimes I'll be on those calls I've been on calls where I just called to say, hey, it was great seeing you yesterday. And that call turned into a 15, 20, 30-minute call about football or about gardening or whatever the case may be. Oh my God, I didn't realize I kept you on the phone for this long. I have a quick question. We have this little job. We have this order here. Let me call Frank. And next thing you know, I'm on the phone with Frank, and Frank is like, I do have this order and this job, and it's just annoying. I need 300 copies of this particular binder. And back then, this is before Google Docs and all that stuff. Everything was all manual. Those copies, colors, and everything else, and they were not cheap. And that's how I did it. I refused to allow a system to pressure me into doing something that I didn't think was going to work. But I also knew that once I bucked the system, I better be able to prove or have evidence of what I was doing successful. And yes, there was moments where it was kind of dark, and I was like, oh my God, this is going to, if this doesn't work, I might lose my job. But I would say 99.999% of the time, I always came up on top. And even those times when maybe the results would have probably been the same, I had evidence to show, like, okay, this is what I did. I documented what I did and why I did it. And here are the results. And most of the time, my leadership was like, whoa, we love this. And a lot of times they just left me alone. Keep doing what you're doing. But also understanding that if it stopped working, the expectation was I was going to go back to doing what they wanted me to do. So now, strategies to overcome fear. You just don't wake up and say, okay, I'm not afraid anymore. No, it doesn't work like that. Listen, every decision I make, there's always still fear there. There's still some level of fear, like what if this doesn't work? A lot of you know that I took over ISPS 224, now lovingly called MS 224, Exploration and Discovery in the South Bronx, District 7. And yes, fear is there on a daily basis. It's there. There's nothing I do about it. That's part of the human experience. But I overcome fear. Fear does not overcome me. I acknowledge the fear. I'm open about it. I have my core team at the school, my leadership team, and we talk about this. I say, hey, this is the thing that we got to watch out for this. Like, this is going to be a problem if we don't resolve this. And I paint a picture for them. If we don't do what we need to do, this is the outcomes that we're facing. So what I do is, rather than having the fear live inside of me and I'm having this internal conversations and dialogues, I involve my team. And they know I need to hear from you. What are you thinking? There's so much in my school right now that honestly is strange, because I had to let go because I gave permission to strong key members to take over certain aspects of the school. So, and I tell, like, for example, I'm a big culture guy. How we move in the hallways, the transitions and everything else, my dean took it over. And anyone who's been in that position knows that it requires constant monitoring. And I'll be honest, on Friday, I had a staff member who was kind of like, I'm not happy with the way things were moving, and came to me and said, I was like, listen, I hear you, but you got to go talk to the dean, because that's the space that he's taken over. And I know it's easy to come to me as a principal and say, hey, we need help fixing this, but you're going to go to the dean. And everything in my core wanted to be like, okay, here's a solution. Like, no, I'm creating systems here. If I allow my fear to take over and me jump into the mix and fix the thing, then what am I teaching my dean, who will one day be an amazing principal? What am I showing them by allowing my fears to jump into the mix? So I said to her, you talk to him, and I will also hear from him, because when we have a meeting, I need to know what's going on and whatever the case may be. And that's the thing, and the same thing with even my supervisors. I talk to them. I speak like, hey, this is my concern. And that's one of the hardest things when you talk to your superintendent, your deputy superintendent, district people, because one of the issues was fear too, the fear of being judged. You feel like you don't want to say anything that might make them think that you're not ready, you're not capable. Absolutely not. Because, listen, if I was that damn good, that anything I touch to turn to gold. Why am I a principal? I should be president of the United States. I should be king of the world. If I'm just like King Midas, I'm just that dope. But we're all human. We all have our faults, and and allowing your fears and the things that concern you to not be articulated and expressed to your team, so it could be all hands on deck. It's actually doing you more harm than good. It actually is doing you no good. It's doing you all harm. So that's something that you have to really, keep in mind. And again, it's important that you talk. You talk. And I said this earlier about mentorship and coaching. At any given time, I want to say I have at least 5 coaches. Some are formalized and some are not formal. Some are just like people I've known for years that I can call on. My Rolodex right now, I have former deputy chancellors, I have chancellors, I have superintendents, I have principals, like high-performing principals from around the country. Some are international. People that when I call, they pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Uche, what's going on?" And I don't just call them, but like, "Hey, did you see the football game? How's the weather out there?" I'll call them, but like, "Hey, how's the family?" Blah, blah, blah. Okay. I'm calling because I need a thought partner in this thing. And I am so grateful to have that. I'm so grateful to have that because, again, fear thrives on the self-talk, what you're saying to yourself and what's happening in your head, because then you start to build all kinds of negative scenarios in your head. But when I talk to people, guess what happens? When I talk to those trusted colleagues, coaches, mentors, I hear myself speak. I hear them saying to me, all of a sudden, the fear is out the window. It becomes more of a strategy session. We're sitting here now trying to figure out and calculate the risks and figure out, okay, what are the next steps? And I'm sorry. That's why, it puts you into a winning position. When you do that, listen, I'm going to say it again. You got to involve your staff, your core leadership team, consult with your mentors, have dialogues with your own leadership, your direct report, your supervisors, whether it's superintendent, deputy superintendent, maybe it's your principal if you're AP, it might be your AP if you're a team leader. You got to have these conversations, because once you start having those conversations, trust me, the fear goes away. And then on time, the fear becomes less and less potent. It becomes less loud in your head because hey, problem. Let me go talk to somebody. Rather than problem, oh my God, what am I going to do? This has nothing to do with I. Listen, the school is a team. I'm going to be that corny. There is no I in team. So you have to engage people. So transforming fear into a leadership asset. And I know this sounds weird, right? Everything I've been saying seems like we need to put fear in its proper place, put it in a box and lock it away. But fear can be a leadership asset. I'm going to use combat as an example. Do you think if you were out in combat, like let's say you were in a war, you're in a scenario where you had to survive and you were a soldier, do you think that fear would not exist at all? Do you think that General Patton had no fear? Genghis Khan had no fear? I'm trying to think Shaka Zulu. I'm thinking Colin Powell. I'm thinking about like Hannibal of Carthage had no fear. Of course you have fear. Because again, you go into a space where you might not come back from. The question now is this: do you say, I'm not going there because I'm afraid that I might not come back? Or do you say, how do I leverage my expertise, my knowledge to make sure that the scales are tipped in my favor? So for me, fear, the things that I fear, the things that I face head on, that I have to sit down and figure out what's going on. This might sound corny, like I hate heights. I hate heights. Like I hate heights. But you know what I hate more? I hate the things that I hate. The feeling of that feeling, that fear, I hate that even more. But it cripples me. So my thing is this: how do I make sure I reduce the potency of that thing that makes me scared? So with heights, when I was younger, I would just say, listen, I'm going to go to a roller coaster. I'm going to knuckle it the whole entire time. In time, I'm going to keep my eyes open, and I'm just going to be like, and other times, I'm going to put my hands up in the air and see what happens. I was still afraid, but the fear had less and less of a hold on me. The ultimate thing I ever did, no, actually, before I tell you a story, I'm going to the Grand Canyon. And anyone's been to the Grand Canyon, I think it's like the west or north face, whatever that thing is, and you have the glass bridge, or it's like a plexiglass. It's not a bridge. It's called a skywalk, and it juts up maybe about 20 or 30 yards, if that, maybe less than that. And it's just literally plexiglass, so it's over the edge of Grand Canyon. So you step on this thing, you look down on the floor, you can see straight through to the bottom of the canyon. Terrifying, but you're thinking, if this thing cracks, we done. But I had to do it. I was like, but looking at the pictures made me nauseous. So I was like, I got to do it. Because again, I want to be able to control that thing. The ultimate thing that I did with my fear of heights, I went skydiving. And I've done rappelling out of helicopters, things like that for the job. But jumping out of a plane, just to jump out of the plane, like literally jumping out of a plane, I think it was like 1,600, somewhere between 12 to 1,600 feet in the air. And you're falling. And you're like, if this parachute don't pop off, thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, brothers and sisters. But when I landed, my heart was still racing, but I had the biggest smile on my face because I knew I conquered that. It doesn't mean that the fear's not there. But when I look back at the pictures, I was like, what were you thinking? But a part of me also said, false evidence appearing real. So it's very important that you take your fears and use them as a way to strengthen yourself. And it's what I've done. And like jumping out of a plane was not just for the novelty of it. It gave me a leadership edge because it made me not necessarily fearless, but more bold. And sometimes leadership, you have to be bold. The ability to say, hey, boss, I need to talk to you about this. Can I show you some data? This is what I want to do. And I don't think this other decision might work well for my school or my team or my classroom. While others would just say, hey, team, this is the directive that's coming down. There's nothing we can do about it. So we just got to do our best. Like, no. And again, don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here saying you got to fight on everything that happens because that makes you afraid. No, you got to assess what's going on. Why are you fearing this thing? What is really happening? You consult your coaches, your mentors, whoever. Then when you realize what the thing that you need to fight for is, then that's what you go after. And it might not turn out in your favor, but being bold, man, that's the outcome of transforming fear into a leadership asset. I'm going to say it one more time. Being bold is the outcome of transforming fear into a leadership asset. Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, Shaka Zulu. You're talking about Colin Powell, like our great military leaders. They were bold. They were not fearless. They were bold. But their being bold was based on data, information, strategy, tactics to ensure that they earned a favorable outcome. Man. So, in conclusion, this is much longer than I expected. I thought this was going to be a 20-minute episode. It's pushing more like around 50. But I'm pretty sure whoever sits to watch this whole entire episode, listen to this whole entire episode, is going to get something out of it. Because again, this is something that I know for a fact too many of us are suffering through, fear and crippling us. And it breaks my heart when I come across a principal who tells me, man, if I could have done this differently, I would have done it. If I could do this all over again, I would have done it differently. And that's one of the things that I think we got to do a better job at. Coaching on fear, making sure that our leaders are not necessarily fearless, but they're bold, and they're being given the space to speak their minds, and a lot of leadership shut down leaders, and a lot of systems shut down leaders, and so leaders keep quiet. They wonder why things are still messed up, because they're seeing things in the front line, but that they're not being given permission to speak on. So if we want our schools to achieve excellence and be functioning at the highest level, fear has to be controlled. And the other thing too, we cannot perpetuate fear. We have to allow fear to be what it is, because it's going to exist. We want leaders who are going to be bold and speak their minds. We also need leadership who are going to listen to the leaders and make sure that we come to that space to enact the best possible solutions for our school communities. So again, thank you so much for your time in this moment in time in listening to this. I'm going to put myself out there again. If you are interested in just having a conversation and you're like, listen, I need to work something out here, and I don't have the coaches or the mentors, reach out. If I don't have the answer, I'm pretty sure I know somebody who does. All right. This is Uche Njoku, Sneaker Principal. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sneaker Principal podcast, in which we talked about unveiling fear, specifically how fear impedes principals from achieving school success. All right, y'all. Be well.